From my experience, The Secret World is a great game. It's fast-paced, has a fun story, and provides innovative mechanics for MMORPGs in general. However, there are a few things that can make it feel strange, especially when the first few minutes of gameplay if you're completely new to the environment. I thought I would talk about some perks and quirks of The Secret World so new players aren't completely thrown off. I'll talk about the quirks first because I always hate to end on a down note. A bunch of hotkeys. This is both good and bad. I like to have a lot of quick control over what my character does in the game, so I like that they've included a hotkey for just about everything. Press V to auto-loop, press R to quick reply to a message. These are good mechanics in the game. However, some hotkeys are a bit quirky for me. Two of these stick out in my mind more than others. The first is the sprint key. There is no dynamic sprinting. Sprinting is a toggled action that can only be done outside of combat, so rather than holding a button like shift to sprint, like a bunch of other action-based games, you have to press a hotkey, which will toggle sprinting every time you want to run fast. Sprinting is also how a lot of players holster their weapon. In the case of magic users, this just means putting their hands down, but since the sprint button holsters weapons, it's still a good button to remember. I personally recommend remapping the sprint key to something more accessible than the default of X. Now, the second hotkey that stands out is the camera button. By default, your cursor is enabled, and you have to hold down left or right click to pan the camera. By pressing T, you toggle FPS camera mode. Both camera modes are useful for different reasons, so you'll want to get really comfortable with pressing T over and over again. Dodging. In this game, dodging is a tactical decision because you can't just constantly dodge. Dodging causes a meter to slowly fill back up, and once it's full, you can dodge again. So you have to discern for yourself when it's the right time to dodge so you're not screwed. As I said before, you can't sprint in combat, and regular movement feels as slow as walking, even if it isn't animated that way. With those little quirks out of the way, let's talk about the perks. Classless player builds. No, I'm not saying the players are like the cast of Jersey Shore. If you've played RPGs, you're familiar with classes. These are little templates games give you so you know what your powers are. Fighter, archer, mage, rogue, cleric, etc. As I've said before, this game has no classes. Instead, anybody can learn to do anything. A player who usually sticks to basic damage can learn to be a healer without starting a new character. Remember what I said before about the ability wheel? It starts out as kind of an overload with all those abilities. Conversely, once you understand the wheel, it may feel like you're stuck with the abilities you're working on. What I have to say is this: don't feel like you're stuck, because you're not. This is especially true with passive abilities. You don't need to have a weapon equipped to use its passive abilities. They work regardless. No fall damage. This is kind of unrealistic, but it can really help knowing that the cliff you're climbing up to escape a gang of monsters isn't a dead end. This also helps when setting up ambush points. If you're soloing, or even if you're not, there are plenty of instances where you're going to want a few seconds, maybe even a minute in the case of parties, to get ready for that perfect moment to strike. Having the higher ground often helps in setting up these ambushes, and sometimes that higher ground is many stories in the air. Other times, your safe haven might be at the bottom of a 200-foot drop. Be glad you'll never take damage from a fall. Action-based combat. There are a few MMOs that offer action-based combat, but not a great many. In the case of The Secret World, they want you to be involved in the action at like a Dark Souls level, but the game doesn't punish you in a Souls kind of way. Well, not most of the time. What I mean by action at a Dark Souls level is the level of involvement it asks of you. You have a dodge move, and you're expected to use it. Your character almost never has to stop to perform an ability, so you can attack and move around at the same time. While we're talking about combat, I'd like to mention that there's no mana in this game. I guess they didn't want players so worried about an arbitrary magic bar that they couldn't focus on the fight. However, I think it has more to do with the way magic works in the game. Since magical weapons are still just weapons, like swords or guns, which by the way also have no ammo usage, we can all keep blasting our enemies with infinite lightning. Instead, combat uses a system of builders and consumers. Some abilities build up resources. These are usually basic attacks like a simple fireball or a slash with a sword, rudimentary stuff like that. Other abilities consume the resources you build up. These are the more powerful attacks and spells, like a sword flourish or a blizzard spell. Other than builders and consumers, there are also abilities you can just use, along with the handicap of a recharge timer. These are called elite abilities. Elite abilities have yellow borders on their icons and always appear at the very bottom of an ability card. They're also always very useful, which is why you can only equip one active elite and one passive elite ability at a time. Fast travel. Many games use some kind of fast travel method, and The Secret World is no different. The obvious method from the start is Agartha and the Agartha Conduit Teleport, but in fact, you're also able to fast travel all over individual maps. These animal wells you visit when you die are also teleport points once you've found them, which is really handy when you've taken a mission at one end of the map and it has you running everywhere, only to have to run all the way back to the mission start point to complete it. Please like, subscribe, and share. If you liked this video, you can show your appreciation by donating packs to Lockland in the game.